Never thought it would end like this. He walked among predators with complete trust. For years he called them his daughters, gentle giants raised by hand. But one quiet morning in South Africa, the unthinkable happened. Two white lionesses turned on their longtime caretaker. In moments, the man who had dedicated his life to saving big cats was fatally mauled by the very animals she had sworn to protect. This is the horrifying final chapter in the life of West. Matthew the Lion Whisperer, welcome to today's documentary, The Horrifying Last Minutes of Wes Matthew. We'll explore the shocking details of that tragic morning in Hodsbrook, the warning signified, and the painful decision made in the aftermath. You'll hear how one man's love for wild animals became his downfall and why his story is a wake-up call for anyone who believes lions can truly be tamed. If you care about real-life animal encounters, tragic wildlife stories, and the hard lessons they teach us, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Now let's begin. Wes Matthew wasn't just a man who loved lions. In Limpopo Province, South Africa, he was something of a legend. At 69 years old, West had dedicated decades of his life to conservation, running a private wildlife facility known as the Lion Treetop Lodge. Just outside the bushveld town of Ho, locals knew him simply as Uncle Wes Set. On a private reserve not far from the iconic Kruger National Park, the lodge wasn't just a retreat, it was a sanctuary. West's mission was to provide a protected space for big cats rescued from canned hunting operations and exploitation. But he didn't just feed these animals behind fences. He walked among them. Every morning before the African sun burned away the early mist, West would take two white lionesses, Tina and Mona, out for exercise on foot. He raised them from cubs, bottle-fed them, and claimed they were fully habituated to humans. To him, they weren't dangerous. They were daughters. People would watch in awe as the elderly man moved casually beside the massive cats, sometimes even touching noses with them. He believed in building bonds through trust, not dominance. His confidence was absolute. For West, neighbors would say these weren't wild predators, they were family. At the Lion Treetop Lodge, guests stayed in stilted suites and dined under the stars, all while watching lions just beyond the wire. The property advertised itself as a luxury eco-lodge, but what truly brought visitors from around the world was the promise of seeing a man walk side by side with apex predators. Over time, the spectacle became the attraction. Tourists posted videos, media outlets covered the history of the man who shared his life with lions. But behind the awe and admiration, there were whispered concerns. Some questioned the safety of his routines. Others wondered if the line between wild animal and companion had been dangerously blurred. Still, Wes carried on every morning without fail. He opened the enclosure gate, called to Tina and Mona, and stepped into their world. He had done it hundreds of times until the morning of August 26, 2020, when everything changed. For years before the fatal attack in 2017, the Lion Treetop Lodge faced a chilling incident that many believed should have been a wake-up call. It happened inside the very same enclosure. One of the white lionesses, either Tina or Mona, lunged at a lodge worker during routine cleaning. The man suffered serious injuries. Details of the attack were not fully released to the public, but emergency services were dispatched. The workers survived. But the scars, both physical and psychological, ran deep. Local authorities opened an inquiry, and animal welfare organizations took notice. They issued stern reminders: no matter how tame alien appears, it is still a wild predator. In a public statement, one South African wildlife official said bluntly, "Even bottle-fed lions do not lose their instincts. There is no such thing as a safe lion." Animal rights advocates added their voices. Groups like the National Council of SPCAs raised concerns that West's close interactions blurred the lines between human and beast. One widely circulated quote echoed across South African media: "These lions may seem tame, but they retain their primal instincts. The danger never truly disappears." To many in the conservation world, the 2017 incident was a red flag waving in plain sight. But inside the lodge gates, the view was very different. To Wes Matthew, the attack was a rare misstep. An unfortunate incident that didn't reflect the nature of the lions he raised. He was adamant that they were not to blame. He spoke with calm conviction, telling friends and family that the animals were agitated that day, perhaps startled. In his view, it wasn't aggression, it was miscommunication. His belief never wavered. He continued the daily walks, continued opening that gate, continued stepping into the enclosure, with nothing but trust. Family members voiced their unease. Some urged him to consider his routine, but West wouldn't hear it. As far as he was concerned, Tina and Mona were his girls. He believed they wouldn't hurt him because they never had. But that belief, however heartfelt, would soon be tested in the most tragic way imaginable. It was the morning of August 26, 2020. The sun had just begun its steady climb over the acacia trees that lined the outskirts of Hojuit. The air was crisp, still cool from the night before, and the only sounds were the distant calls of birds and the quiet shuffle of paws on dirt. At approximately 9 a.m., West Matthew opened the familiar enclosure gate at Lion Treetop Lodge, just as he'd done hundreds of times before. Waiting eagerly on the other side were his white lionesses, Tina and Mona, muscular, powerful and restless. As always, West carried no weapon, no tranquilizer, not even a stick, just his voice, just his confidence. He called them softly, and they followed. The three of them made their way onto a dusty path that wound behind the lodge, one of their regular walking routes. The bush was dense in some, parts open in others. To West, this was nothing more than another morning in his private world, a routine stroll with the animals he had raised and loved. Booty wasn't entirely alone. His wife Gil Matthew followed in a vehicle just a short distance behind. As she often did, it was a precaution. Though Wes rarely acknowledged it as necessary, Gil watched them from inside the car. Her husband walking casually, the lionesses brushing against his sides. It all seemed normal until it wasn't. Without warning, Tina and Mona stopped walking. They turned fast, coordinated, instinctive, and in a flash, the calm of the morning was shattered. Both lionesses lunged at West. Gil watched in horror as her husband was pulled to the ground. The two lions who minutes before had nuzzled at his hands were now tearing into him with terrifying force. There was no hesitation, a moment of hesitation to stop the attack. It was a frenzy. The sounds were primal. Growl, snapping jaws, the sickening weight of bodies thrashing in the dusk. Gil screamed and scrambled to call for help. She radioed staff, dialed emergency services, did everything she could, but by the time responders arrived, it was too late. West Matthew lay motionless on the trail, his body mauled beyond recognition. Paramedics pronounced him dead at the scene. The cause of death was clear: severe bite wounds, multiple traumatic injuries, catastrophic blood loss. It all happened in minutes. Witnesses described the scene as chaotic and unbearable. The trail, where he had once walked with pride, was now soaked in blood and scattered with tufts of white fur, and the two lionesses, his pride and joy, stood nearby, eerily calm after the attack, as if the violence had been inevitable. Later that day, a family friend would say they loved him, and then they killed him. The man who once claimed lions could be trusted had been destroyed by the very creatures he raised to love him. In the end, there was no warning growl, no second chance, only instinct and death. In the days following the deadly attack at Lion Treetop Lodge, investigators combed through every detail, searching for an answer. Why had Tina and Mona, the lionesses West Matthew raised, from cubs hand-fed and walked every single day, suddenly turned on him? There was no obvious trigger. Officials confirmed that no food was present on the trail that morning. There had been no aggressive handling. West hadn't yelled, provoked, or stumbled. According to Gil Matthew's account, it happened in an instant, without warning, without reason. So what went wrong? One theory suggested that the lionesses, now 5 years old, had reached full sexual maturity. In the wild, lions at this age begin to assert territorial dominance, and though West was their caretaker, he was also another presence in their domain, a domain that might have shifted in their minds without anyone realizing it. Another theory pointed to the reality of captivity. For years, West had walked the fine line between human and beast, but even animals raised in affection never lose their instincts entirely. Experts warned that decades of habituation could erode trust, not on the human side, but on the animals. In rare, tragic cases, the psychological boundaries between play dominance and violence blur, and what follows is chaos. Still others speculated that perhaps a sudden, Movement, a stumble, or even a moment of vulnerability, something as simple as turning his back, was enough to spark a primal reaction too. Apex predators bonded with each other, more than with any human acting on pure instinct. But for West's family, no explanation could soften the blow. In a painful, gut-wrenching decision made just days after the attack, the Matthew family agreed to have Tina and Mona euthanized. The lions were destroyed at the scene with the consent of authorities and wildlife specialists. In their statement, the family expressed heartbreak not only for the loss of West, but for what they had to do to the very animals he loved. Most, it was the hardest decision we ever had to make, a relative said quietly. But we couldn't risk them hurting someone else, not even professionals. West would never have wanted anyone else to be harmed. And just like that, the lions who had once symbolized love, loyalty, and I were gone along with the man who believed they would never harm him. 3 lives ended that day on a dusty trail in Limpopo, 1 by choice, 2 by tragedy, and the question of why may never be fully answered. In the hours following Wes Matthews' death, the tranquil bushveld of Limpopo fell silent. Lion Treetop Lodge, once alive with the soft roar of white lions and the rustle of curious tourists, immediately ceased all operations. Thar gates were locked. The trails were empty. For the first time in years, no one walked with lions. Authorities from the Limpopo Department of Economic Development, Environment, and Tourism launched a full-scale investigation into the incident. But beyond, the immediate tragedy of firestorm was brewing, one that reached far beyond hoot animal rights. Activists and wildlife conservationists around the world reacted with shock and anger. Social media lit up with outrage statements poured in from groups like the EMS Foundation and the Born Free Foundation, condemning not just the incident but the entire practice of keeping big cats in captivity for private use. Critics argued that West's death was not a freak accident, but a consequence of a flawed system. South Africa's legal framework allows for the private ownership and breeding of lions under game farm permits. On paper, it's legal. In practice, many believe it's deeply unethical. Conservationists accuse private lodges of exploiting exotic animals for tourism profits, while sadists stepping long-term welfare. And Wes Matthews' story became the face of that debate. While his intentions were never questioned, his love for lions was indisputable. Many experts insisted that affection is not a substitute for safety. Even lions, raised with compassion, they argued, remain wild animals, not domestic pets. Within days, headlines around the globe asked the same question. Should anyone walk with lions? Some condemned the practice entirely. Others pointed to the lack of consistent regulations across provinces. The case exposed loopholes in licensing, inspection protocols, and the blurred line between conservation and entertainment. Still, in Limpopo, the tone was more sorrowful. Than outraged local communities remembered West as Uncle West, a man who spoke softly, loved fiercely, and believed in harmony between man and beast. Friends, family, and former visitors shared tributes online, recounting the unforgettable moments they had walking beside the lions under his care. His wife, Gil Matthew, released a quiet statement to the press. He died doing what he loved, but it didn't have to end this way. In that single sentence, the complexity of the tragedy was laid bare. A life devoted to lions, a death that shook the very foundation of human-animal trust, and a lingering question that still haunts Theology. He left behind. Wes Matthew dedicated his life to proving that humans and lions could coexist, not in distant observation but in intimate companionship. But loving an apex predator does not eliminate its danger. Lions are not domesticated dogs. They do not forget their wild instincts. No matter how many years pass, no matter how many gentle walks or feeding routines, a predator's nature can resurface in an instant. Captivity may soften their responses, but it cannot erase their biology. On August 26, 2020, at approximately 9 in the morning, on a familiar dirt path behind the Lion Treetop Lodge in Limpopo, 2 white lionesses, Tina and Mona, turned on their man, who had raised them since they were cubs. In seconds, the trust of years was shattered. Gil Matthew, his wife, watched in horror from her vehicle, helpless as the lions dragged West to the ground, their instincts overriding every bond that once existed. By the time emergency responders arrived, it was too late. He was already gone. For many, those final moments are a chilling reminder that no matter how strong the bond between man and beast nature is, never truly tamed. And yet West wasn't naive. He understood the risks. He walked with them anyway, because to him they were family. But in the end it was that belief, the very trust that defined his life, that cost him everything. Wes Matthew died doing what he loved. But perhaps the real question now is whether that love blinded him to the truth. Wait. If you found this story shocking, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel for more shocking real-life animal attack documentaries, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. We drop new documentaries every day that explore the untamed edge between humans and nature, and how it sometimes turns deadly. And we want to hear from you. Do you think wild predators should ever be kept as pets? Should private ownership of lions be allowed at all? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. This was the horrifying last minutes of Wes Matthew. Thanks for watching, and stay